Hi there. You have joined the Don't Mess with Our Kids podcast. My name is Jenny Donnelly, and I am here with my good friend Shauna Damberg. And there are many women of all ages and men as well who are very concerned about the attack on our children. And we know that it's gone too far, and we're saying enough is enough. And so the guests that we have on this podcast are highlighting things like the injustices that are happening to our children and the action that we can take spiritually and on the ground to see families and children protected. We know that this is such a huge concern for our nation right now and even globally. And so this is what's pretty neat. In Peru in 2016, there was a grassroots movement that started called Don't Mess with Our Kids. They were able to turn their country around. They were able to turn their government around. And many, many, many families came in the streets to stand for family. They were able to oust the prime minister, oust the education minister, and George Soros pulled out all of his funding. When we heard about this, that there was a country that was turning this nonsense around, we said, this has to happen in America. And so that's what we're doing. Don't Mess with Our Kids is a grassroots movement now in the United States of America. It's very easy for you to engage with this. You're doing it right now by listening to this podcast. Please share this with people that you know that want to stand for family and are not okay with what is happening to our children. And last but not least, I want to tell you that in October of 2024, October 12th precisely, we are going to be standing with 1 million women and their families in Washington, D.C. at our national mall. We're going to be praying. It's going to be several hours. We'll be right there together. And we're going to be praying for this nation on the Day of Atonement. It's the highest holy day on the Jewish calendar to purify a nation. But we're also going to talk about how we can take action to see this tyranny come to an end. You'll be able to join us also around the world, virtually, of course. And so stay tuned for more about that, but mark your calendars for October 12th, a very, very important day for anybody who loves family. And so now I want to bring on our guest today. I'm so excited to have her. I've seen her on YouTube. I've seen her on social media, and I'm like, who is this woman who is so brave, so courageous, and standing for truth in the face of evil? And so anybody like that, we want to have on our podcast and grow and glean from this incredible woman. Her name is Leigh Dundas. She is a human rights attorney and abolitionist dedicated to preserving basic freedoms while also combating global injustices like child slavery and the peddling of medical tyranny disguised as progress. I love that. And she has done a ton of work with child brothels. I mean, what you've done here, Leigh, is just incredible. And I cannot wait to hear more of what you're doing and how we can have an impartation of bravery and courage from you. So let's bring Leigh on the show today. Thank you so much, Leigh, for joining us. We're so excited to have you and hear from you today. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit more about yourself and anything else that you want people to know, especially the assignment that God has you on to bring justice to the families and the children of our, not just our nation, but our globe.
Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me, Jenny and Shauna. It's an honor to be here and to be able to share with your audience, who I am sure are committed to the mission that you have set forth before them. And really, whether it's explicitly stated or just sort of implicit at this point, I think it's every parent and indeed every citizen's really role this time around on the planet, right? To do what we can to leave this place a better place than it is now, and ensure that our children actually know the freedom that we were privileged to grow up enjoying. So I was just a regular soccer mom, like a lot of us, like you guys probably. I mean, I had the things I was busy doing. I was an attorney. I came by it a little bit unusually. I had skipped high school, started college when I was 14, graduated at 17. I wanted to be a dolphin trainer. SeaWorld wasn't hiring, so decided I should apply to Yale Law School when my mother mentioned that I was uniquely gifted at arguing, and apparently she was right. So, so if you're listening, Mom, push record. I'm saying it once, I won't say it again. You were right, but yeah. So I went to law school, and when I got out, I was just representing Fortune 500 companies in litigation. Taking on some of the biggest multi-billion dollar cases for Fortune 500 companies, which are the 800-pound gorillas on the block. And it was great training ground, although it was a little bit I don't want to say soul sucking, but it was not particularly gratifying. And in 2013, I was given an opportunity by some Christian pastors who had founded an anti-sex slavery nonprofit to come on board as their general counsel and to move part-time to Southeast Asia and start busting child brothels who were selling 5, 6, 8, 10, 12-year-old girls to pedophiles. Wow. And that was a bit of a left turn. It was actually one heck of a left turn from what I had been doing previously, but it was absolutely gratifying work. It was very satisfying work. There was a huge need for it. You know, human slavery right now is the second largest and fastest growing crime in the world because there's more profit that is had in selling 7-year-olds to sex buyers than there is in selling cocaine to an addict. If I sell one of your listeners, you know, a stash of Coke tonight and they like it and they come back tomorrow and they want more Coke, I need to have portioned off part of the money they gave me last night and gone and resupplied my coffers with cocaine to give them some more the next day. It's not 100% profit margin industry. You have to take some of that gross and spend it on your supplies so that you can then make a net. But selling children is a whole different enterprise. If I sell you a 7-year-old and you like it and you come back tomorrow night, I don't need to have bought another 7-year-old in the intervening 24-hour time period. I just rent her over and over until she dies. And my profit is damn near 100% because the only cost I have is the cost to keep her alive, which is a Happy Meal a day here in America or a cup of rice a day if you're in Laos or Cambodia or Thailand, the places I work. And in a lot of cases, the shelter to shelter these girls is free. They're in a grass hut somewhere. Or maybe they're in a Super 8 hotel room, 8, 10 at a time here in America for $30 a night. But, you know, add up your Happy Meals in your Super 8 hotel room, and that's hardly anything to sneeze at compared to the profit you're raking in. So it is the single fastest growing crime in the world. They're expecting it to topple the drug industry for the top spot inside the next decade. And my role was to fight against this in communist countries in Southeast Asia. And that's what I was hired to do in 2013. And it was a heck of an education because you don't go into places like Cambodia that had a communist takeover. In 1 week, on April 17th, it will be 54 years to the day, I think, or no, 49 years to the day. God, I'm bad at math. But anyway, almost 50 years to the day, I think, since Pol Pot rolled into Phnom Penh, Cambodia. And they told them, listen carefully, they told them it's just going to be 2 weeks. Everybody come out in the streets, leave your belongings behind. We're going to put you out in the countryside and you're going to learn how to farm. We're going to go back to nature. It's going to be good for the planet. It's going to be good for you. And they targeted people like you and me, the intellectual folk, the folks who had no calluses on their hands, the folks who were wearing glasses, indicating maybe they had a job that involved reading and writing and stuff like that and not farming. And the reason they went for that particular demographic is because we're the threat during a takeover. We are the ones with the money. We are the ones with the brain power. We are the ones with the connections, ourselves, our husbands, our employers, our buddies, our church folk. We are the ones who will fight back and push back. And that is something that any totalitarian overthrow cannot countenance. And so if they're doing it right, they get rid of us first. And so they said, it'll be just 2 weeks. You're going to go out and you're going to learn how to farm. And when we didn't die quickly enough by way of starvation, they shot us in the back, although bullets are expensive. So they rapidly moved to just axing people in the back and letting them fall face down into shallow graves, where to this day, 50 years later, when the rains come during typhoon season every year, it washes away the dirt and the bones of the dead rise to the top. And there's a lesson here, and it's a lesson I taught my 8-year-old inadvertently. I was starting to do the sex slavery work, anti-sex slavery work. My husband and daughter were with me. My daughter was in 3rd grade at the time. And we'd been on a tour the day prior in Cambodia where the tour guide said, have you seen the killing fields yet? And I said, no, I've not. And he said, they're 30 minutes outside of Phnom Penh where your hotel is. And they're just a bunch of grassy fields. You really should go. And I did my due diligence as a parent. I Googled it before I said, oh, let's just walk off with an 8-year-old to something called the Killing Fields. And it was just a bunch, all the pictures that I could pull up in Cambodia, because they had heavy censorship of their internet at the time, much like we're seeing now. But this was 10 years ago. It was just a bunch of fields. It looked like any undeveloped lot in Southern California. And I'm like, all right, we'll go. So there my husband and I are, and they gave us a little, audio self-recorded guided walking tour headset. And my daughter immediately pitched a fit. She's like, I want my own headset. My husband and I are like, okay, compromise. You get a headset, but we listen to it first to make sure it's not, going to give you nightmares, babe. And most of the tracks were very just educational. They weren't too scary, and we let her listen. But what I didn't know is at the very end of the Killing Fields, they have a big, tall glass structure. It looks like a big glass Rubik's Cube that's about 4 stories tall. And it's way at the end of the fields. And so by the time we were done, my daughter spies this monument, right? And she goes racing off to it like any self-respecting third grader. And by the time my husband and I caught up, she was already at the glass. And at the glass are the skulls in this glass monument of the dead that rise to the surface during each typhoon season, where the Cambodians who escaped the genocide for their part very carefully take the bones and place them into this monument so that we never again forget the crimes that were committed there. And my daughter is nose to nose and literally eyeball to eye socket with the skull of an 8-year-old kid, because they segregate on the shelves the men and the women and the child skeletons. And I am horrified at this point, and I am thinking, oh my gosh, in for a penny, in for a pound. What do I do? What do I do? And she looks at me and she said, Mama, how did this happen? And I knelt down next to her, because there was no unringing the bell at that point. And I dragged her little face over to mine and away from the skull. And I looked her in the eyes and I said, those in power lied to the people. And by the time the people figured it out, it was too darn late. You let this be a lesson, my love. Don't you ever listen or trust people in power simply because they are in power. If anything, you distrust them as your default, as your baseline, until such time as they have proven themselves trustworthy. Do you hear me? Mm. And she said, absolutely. And right now she is at UC Davis, one of the most, if not the most liberal campus in the world. And she is not one of the 51% of our American youth who, when surveyed in college, indicate they think it would be cool to live in a communist or socialist country.
Wow.
Yep. Yep.
My goodness. Wow.
Unbelievable.
The answer for your parents who are listening, and the grandparents and the uncles and the average citizen who's a good neighbor, is to quit taking your kids to Disneyland over the summer break and spring break. If they live in America, they've seen enough of that to choke a horse. No more Grand Canyon for you. No more Mount Rushmore. You buy a $200 ticket to Cambodia on June 17th. You hear me? And you take your children to places you never thought in a million years you would take them. Because there is a difference between talking and showing. Mm. And this is a lesson they will never forget. And I thought I was going to have to do 10 years of therapy with my daughter after that day. And we haven't done a single hour. That child's head is screwed on better than mine. Wow. So we are in the midst of a communist overthrow, if you didn't know this. And it is every parent and every citizen's duty to fight hard peacefully now and get this fought down before it's too late.
Well, let's talk about that, about the I think there's a lot of people who still believe that we are maybe grabbing and overreaching for ideas that are not true, like, no, not America, it can't happen here. These are stories of other countries. Can you talk to us about what it is happening in our nation right now that should be alarming us? These are signposts. These are 911 sirens saying, do not comply, do not conform, because this leads somewhere that we never thought could happen in our country. Can you talk to us about that a little bit?
Absolutely. So Khrushchev said, a little quick detour to history for a moment, because it sets the stage. Khrushchev, leader of Soviet Union a while back, said in the 50s, I will take America without firing a single shot. I will destroy her from within. That was the quote. Oh. They did not believe they could outgun us, not militarily at that point in time. So they started a very slow burning war. And in the late 60s, actually, I think it was the early 60s, I want to say it was 63, they had 45 communist goals that were red They were openly read into our American congressional record in the 60s. And those 45 goals included things like taking over the student press, taking over the real press, taking down statues, making fun of our Constitution and gutting it to make it sound like an old fuddy-duddy document that didn't really have the force of law anymore. They wanted to take over the American educational system so they could use it to quote unquote purvey on a conveyor belt style factory line communist socialist propaganda. They wanted to normalize perversion and take aim at the nuclear family. Why? Well, take a lesson from Cambodia. They also took aim at the nuclear family. It is when you take out churches and families, you take out the two single biggest, strongest defensive positions that can fight back against any tyrannical overthrowing force, right? It's the family because we're wired by our genetics to want to save those of us that are related to us by blood. And of course, churches are the other outpost that's very, very good at protecting their own. So they knew they needed to get rid of patriotism. They needed to get rid of the First and Second Amendment. They needed to get rid of the Constitution. They needed to get rid of the press because the press, if it tells the truth, will be a huge, huge hurdle for them. But if it's telling propaganda, it can be used against the American people. And they needed to take over the schools. And all you need to do is look around right now. Oh, and they wanted to take over one or more political parties. And they wanted to officially recognize Red China and socialist communist countries and permit free trade amongst them. So I don't have time to go over all 45 goals, but you can just listen to the ones that I just managed to rattle off the top of my head and do your own homework and go, wow, have they checked that box? And they're more than halfway there if you do an honest assessment. And so that's sort of what they've been working toward. And it really went into overdrive in 2020. But if you're a student of history, if you studied communist overthrows or fascist overthrows, it doesn't really matter, far right, far left, any megalomaniac totalitarian dictator, whether it was Stalin or Pol Pot or the Rwandan genocide or any genocide, any takeover, it follows the same playbook. They brainwash the group. And one of the interesting things about the social isolation program, social distancing is what they called it, but it was in reality social isolation, is in the I think it was in the 50s, prior to the CIA being implemented. It was the forerunner to the CIA. Our American military scientists and doctors got together with their counterparts in England and Canada, and they rented rooms at the Montreal Ritz-Carlton. And their single goal was to figure out the most effective way to break a person down psychologically. That was it. That was what these military government scientists were trying to figure out. And they commissioned a bunch of studies, and they were fascinating. And at the end of a few years, what they'd realized is that the single quickest way to brainwash somebody, to break them down emotionally, to ruin them so that they will just become a puppet on a string for you, is not to physically torture them. It's not to deprive them of food and water. It's not to waterboard them. It's to isolate them. It makes them uniquely susceptible to signal data. What is signal data? It's brainwashing cues. It is the functional equivalent of smoking 2 cigarettes containers a day. It's 2 boxes of cigarettes a day, 2 packs of cigarettes a day, and drinking a 5th of Jack Daniels.
Wow.
That's medically what it does to you. So when we were socially isolating our children for their own health from a virus that posed a 0.00000 nothing risk to their health, okay, what they were actually doing is something that the UN now considers to be cruel and unusual punishment and outlaws prisons from doing for more than 15 consecutive days. We are not allowed to do this to our POWs in wartime. Why? Because it ruins people emotionally, and we were doing that to our children. To our children. You would have been better giving them a 5th of Jack Daniels and a couple packs of cigarettes and sending them to school. It destroys the ventral striatum, which is the part of your brain that is responsible for love and learning. And that is why we had an 11-year-old on Zoom school right before Christmas in 2020 in America, in California, no less, blow their brains out on Zoom school. Even POWs cannot withstand this type of torture. And that's what we did. And not just the American public, but in the main, our own children. So when I say you need to fight back as a parent, I don't just mean, oh, you need to write a $35 check to your favorite nonprofit. I mean, you, not your neighbor, not your husband, not your mother, not your uncle, not your 11-year-old child, you, the mom, you, the mama bear, need to stand between who is coming for your child, whether it's a censorship program, trannies and drag queens in school, men standing in locker rooms, your daughter competing in swim against the Leah whatever, your husband buying the next Bud Light. Absolutely not. You break their back economically, you vote with your feet, and you do the programs that I have been running for the last 4 years that have had a 100% success rate in defeating tyranny. And no, they're not lawsuits, and no, they're not legislation, because when was the last time you opened up a history book and heard your history professor in your junior AP whatever class say, now class, we're going to learn how a very clever lawyer got us out of World War II? Said no history buff ever. You don't litigate or legislate your way out of war, and we are at war right now. And if we keep funding the nonprofits who are doing the same old thing, we will lose. And by that, I mean your child and mine will die.
Yeah.
I love you. I love lawsuits. I didn't go to law school for 3 years and pass the damn bar, which was the hardest thing I've ever done in this lifetime, to take aim at my profession. But there is a tool for every problem. If you have a flat tire and I give you a spoon and a fork, good luck with that. I give you a tire iron, you're done right now. Okay? Lawsuits and legislation work well in an American country, in a constitutional republic, and not when we are at war. That is not the scene we have right now. We are at war. It's a 5G war. There's no bombs going off. This is an intellectual PR brainwashing war, but we are in a war no less. And we are not going to legislate or litigate our way out of it. And even if we were, you don't have a law degree and you don't have $500,000 to give to the guy next door who does have a law degree. And even if you did, in the blue states like mine, you are running a 90 to 99% loss on those lawsuits. And that is why I have not filed a single lawsuit in 49 months. But I've done things that are very effective. And that is my assignment. You asked, it took me a long time to get here. That's my assignment this year, is to teach other people what I have learned how to do, because it doesn't cost anything and it's uniquely effective.
Yeah. Tell us about that. Cause I'm going, okay, a lot of us are awake to the problems, but a lot of us don't know what to do about it. And so start going into that, Leigh, cause I'm like, what do you got then? Lawsuits aren't working. This isn't happening. This is going down. What can we do? That was so huge. Just backtracking for a second, what you said about isolation. Because I'm thinking about just even phones, like forget, anyone forcing us to stay in our homes. Kids are just sitting around isolated on their phones, on their computers, playing games. I mean, wow, the isolation, the way that we've been isolated, and our children especially, but even all people have been isolated. My daughter-in-law, this is something that's trending. So these young moms are wanting to have their kids outside for 1,000 hours. I believe it's a year. I can't remember the time frame, but she's like, I can do it. I've got it. Get their rain boots on, their raincoats, and she's getting them outside for, 2 or 3 hours at least a day. Cause where we live, it's Portland. So it's pretty rainy a lot, but I'm just thinking about, that was huge. Thank you for saying that. I have never heard that before. And that was profound, but go into Leigh, just what can we do? What can we do about it? What are you teaching people? I want to know all about it.
Okay, so there are 3 programs, and they're going to be the subject of my new book. I launched my old book, the book that's out right now. It's called Just Stand Up: My Fight for Freedom from the Brothels of Asia to the Streets of America. You can get it on Amazon, but my new book, I'm going to go in detail into this, and I'm also going to be doing a podcast and an online training program. General Flynn is with me. He just gave me a teeny bit of money. He said, I want to partner with you on getting this rolled out. There are 3 initiatives that have worked very, very well. They're what we do in communist countries, because you're not going to, again, file a lawsuit and get anywhere over in a communist country fighting the child brothels. So it's a name and shame program. That's the first thing you can do. Very simple steps. You find the bad program. You find the bad guy pushing the bad program. It might be a board. There's 5 or 10 people on the board. You don't want all of them. You want the 1 or 2 mean girls or mean guys who are the ringleaders. There's always 1 or 2 ringleaders. Those are your people. And you want to know them. You do opposition research on them. You call up your soccer moms who have 3-hour nap times where they're not otherwise busy each afternoon. You call up the retired cops, the retired military intel guys who are Republicans, and they're in your community, and they used to be a private eye, or they are a private eye, or they have access to databases, or they're just really good at internet sleuthing. And you say, these are the names of the bad guys who are pushing the whatever agenda, and I want to know them better than I know myself and my spouse. And that is how I got rid of the health officer in Orange County, California. 2020, around this time, all of a sudden they got rid of our old guy in the middle of his term, and they installed a new girl by the name of Nicole Quick. And she launched a mask mandate at midnight on Friday night going into Memorial Day weekend in 2020. And people are like, oh my gosh, are you going to sue? Are you going to sue? And I'm like, no, I read the code. The code, it's a horrible law. It gives her carte blanche authority. we would lose. And by the way, even if it were a good law, the judge wouldn't rule in our favor because all the judges in Orange County are busy changing their party from Republican to Democrat. You think that coward is going to rule in your favor? Like, I mean, there's a reason, guys, I didn't file lawsuits. It wasn't just like a wild whim I had. I'm like, but give me a minute. So I called up 2 retired PIs I knew, used to work, police force stuff. And I said, hey, I want to beg a favor. You're Republicans, right? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, this is your part of the fight. Go get me everything there is to know on this woman. So they came back and they said, well, for the first 8 years after she got out of med school, she was handing out Suboxone prescriptions to heroin addicts at her mother's methadone clinic. Her mommy was also an MD in Provo, Utah or somewhere, sticks of Utah. They were Mormon country. And I said, that's good enough for government work. And I went in front of our board of supervisors on Tuesday and I said, I think you fell down on your due diligence. You hired a woman who was handing out Suboxone scripts to heroin addicts. She was giving one opiate to a guy who was trying to get off his first opiate. The heck were you thinking? Now she's taking aim at the health and welfare of the 3.2 million residents in this county and our kids, depriving them of oxygen. You want to know how Auschwitz worked? It was an oxygen deprivation chamber. That's what the gas did. You want to know what a mask does? Let me go through the chapter and verse on that, which I don't have time to do right now. But if your folks don't know how bad masking is because it cuts the oxygen, they should, and call me later. But I gave them hell, and the woman was horrified. She stood up in the middle of the board meeting, fled. I had her home address. We took 10, 12 soccer moms from the Waldorf school that my daughter went to preschool at. It wasn't a big crowd. We went and stood in front of her house in Irvine, and I looked into her little private eye that was above her gate, her little eye in the sky, and I said, let me tell you what I didn't have time to say in the 3 minutes on the microphone. I know your mommy was left by your daddy, and you were so sad, and your mommy was so sad that she hired a psychic and a private eye to track your wayward father down, and you did every term paper from high school through grad school on men who leave their wives. But I didn't know that you had children. My PIs fell down on the job, but I know what those little tiny rollerblades and scooters are all about because I'm an Orange County soccer mom too. It looks like you have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. Let me tell you something, my dear. You better make damn sure you're masking your little babies from their little bitty eyeballs down to their little bitty clavicles every time you walk out your front door. Because if you're not, I'm going to be standing here video recording and blasting it all over the world. She resigned the next day. My total cost was $100 at Kinko's getting some signs made and some bullhorns bought out of Walmart. Nothing I learned in law school taught me how to do that.
Wow.
That I learned in Southeast Asia. When I walked out of my Bangkok hotel room in 2014, I was in the middle of a coup d'etat. The popular masses over there have a coup every 6 years. Why? Because they've lost the ability to elect their leaders. Note to self, don't let it go any further south than it already has here in America. But that was a side note. What I'm really trying to get to at my next main dish for your audience is I looked around and I saw men with their bare hands fighting against guys in tanks because that's what a military coup d'etat looks like. And I was there getting shot at 330 days a year by radical jihadis who were controlling the brothels. We already had a firefight on our hands. And I'm like, God, why do you have me here? And by the way, when you say you have a good showing at your local board meeting, I'm going to ask you if it looks like this. If it doesn't look like this at your board meeting, you still got work to do. And this is what the coup d'etat looked like. There were military on the streets and the men were fighting with their hands and against guys in tanks and with their bare hands against military weapons. And it was 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And it was a bit of a stalemate. And this went on for months. And then one day, the Thailand farmers had enough. They're like, we're done. And they got in their farm equipment and they ran their farm equipment, their big old earth movers and tractors and backhoes and whatnot, 6, 8, 10 hours across the Thailand countryside at 5, 10, 15 miles an hour until they encircled Bangkok International Airport. And they brought that country to its flippin' knees in a New York second. And I watched that play out and I went, okay, God, I think there's a lesson here. And as soon as I said that, I still remember chatting with God and going, this is fascinating. Oh, like I'm ever going to need to know how to do a convoy. I live in a first world country, but timing is everything, right? So fast forward 10 years, and I'm helping the Canadians with their convoy, and I was the unseen hand who architected the entirety of the People's Convoy here in America. And if you don't remember, in the blue states, Oregon, Cali, Chicago, wherever you might be living, we were still locked down 2 years ago in the spring, and we would never have been opened up if we hadn't done that convoy. And as soon as we announced the convoy, hadn't done it yet, we announced it, and our little flyer started going viral. We're going to do a convoy on February 23rd of 2022. Biden called up Sisolak, he called up Newsom, he called up all the blue state governors, and he said, I want you to open up this week. And in a row, Nevada, Cali, Hawaii, all these states, bam, 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 Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, all in 1 week. They all opened back up. It was very interesting. And he wanted to announce at the State of the Union at the beginning of March that he was the victor over COVID. And he didn't know why this convoy was going on, because it was a bit of a moot point, because we were the victor over convoy or over COVID. And we still ran the convoy, because you don't make a promise you don't keep. That's rule number one in war. And people said, Leigh, why'd you run a convoy? And they said, it's moot. And I'm like, yeah, but it wouldn't have been if we hadn't have done it. So your two things that you need to do as a soccer mom in Orange County or Nebraska or Maine or Texas or wherever you live are name and shame programs, find the bad man, find the bad plan, learn everything there is to know about him, and put it on blast. You can't blackmail him. You'll go to prison for 10 years. You just put it on blast, and like a cockroach running away from the light, they will scuttle away and drop it like a hot rock, and they'll go chase some other thing, but at least you've safeguarded your people for right now. Or you do a mass initiative move. Gandhi, Martin Luther King, convoy, nationwide walkout. These are the things that we have done recently. And you get your neighbors. I don't care if your school board's under attack. You ask everybody in a 100-mile radius to come to your board. And the quid pro quo is when they're under attack next month, you go to their board. Okay. And if you can get 12 moms together, sometimes that's all it took. That's all it took to get rid of our health officer here and our vaccine passports and the whole 9 years. But if you can do a convoy, if it's a bigger lift, don't be afraid. Do what you're doing, you guys, right there with your nationwide October thing, like a 1 million person march, a 1 million person fast, a 1 million person prayer. These things change the tide. Do not ever think that you cannot, as one man or one woman or one kid, change the tide. Margaret Mead said, never doubt a small group of concerned citizens can change the world, for indeed, we are the only ones who ever have.
Ooh, wow, that's so good. Okay.
So good.
I could listen to you for literally ever. I've watched a lot of your videos and they are amazing. And I know our audience is going to want to hear more of you. If they haven't already heard you before, they're going to want to hear more. So tell us a little bit about how people can find you and then any last thoughts you have.
Yeah. And hold up your book again.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. So you can find me at my new personal website, which is leighdundas.com. If you have not noticed, my mother gave me extra letters. It's LEIGHDUNDAS.com. And the book is Just Stand Up, My Fight for Freedom from the Brothels of Asia to the Streets of America. There's some really compelling stories in there. I talk about getting a Holocaust survivor to do a 30-second voiceover. We put a TV ad on the air. That's how we got rid of the vaccine passports in Orange County during the fight. But a lot of the book, most of the book is not about the freedom fight. Well, it's about the precursor to that. It's about the brothel fight. And if you've never been in the back room of a brothel, I take you there without need of you actually having to take yourself there. So the teddy bears you see around the walls, those are the pallets the girls sleep on and service their public on. You literally will get to understand inside and out one of the biggest threats to our modern day society, which is the brothel trade. It's how a lot of our politicians are controlled to do the bad things they do, is they have a Hunter Biden laptop or a sex crime in their past, and they may be otherwise good people, but somebody comes along with a thumb drive and says, you're going to do what I want you to do, because if you don't, I'm going to show your wife and the public all this, and all of a sudden you've got a bot, a bribed, a blackmailed politician. So we need to clean up society, not just for the betterment of all of us, but also for the betterment of our political structure. And I go a lot into the stuff, and apparently it's kind of like Irma Bombeck goes to the brothels. My daughter read the first chapter. She's a teenager. She doesn't give out praise at all. And she took it into a manicure appointment, and they made her put the book down because she was laughing so hard. And then I had General Flynn's commanding officer say it was the best thing he had ever read and worth its weight in gold. And I say that not to polish my own halo, but simply because a lot of the stuff I cover in there is very heavy weather, but I try to do it in a way that doesn't leave you just crying and also uplifts you, unless you know the way that you can actually take action in your county or your state. The other thing you can do is you can donate to my tax-deductible 501c3 nonprofit, which is called freedomfighternation.org. Again, that is freedomfighternation.org, for that is what we are. That is what we do. That is what we need to be doing. Yeah, I need money. I haven't had a paycheck in 49 months, nor has my husband. We used to have a very nice, normal life. He did stem cells. We had made a good living, funded my human rights work ourselves. But we just jumped with both feet into the fight, and running convoys and doing nationwide boycotts and making TV ads when you're a doctor and a lawyer don't leave a lot of time for your day job. So I'd like to stay in the freedom fight. I think God has called me to this, but I need some shoe leather to do it. And I want to get this training program rolled out to the masses so you can sign up your kid yourselves to learn these things. It is, to me, it is like water to fish or oxygen to us. You need to know this stuff, and they don't teach it in school. And one more quick plug, Kairos, Kairos University is asking me to teach a 4-Saturday course. I think I'm going to be doing it in May. So stay tuned. Join my podcast sign up on leighdundas.com. And I will also announce there how you can have your kids sign up for the course. They can get high school credit. They can get dual credit. It counts as a GE course for college. And literally, I am going into how our brains are hardwired to be overly obedient and also amazingly wonderful. To be able to bench press, cars off of 3-year-olds when we have to in a pinch, to be able to, if you've never heard the story about the rats drown usually at about 15 minutes when you throw them into water. But if you pluck them out when they're about to give up the ghost and you say, hey, little rat, you got this, you can do it, and you throw them back in, not only will they swim another 15 minutes, even though they just swam to muscle failure the first time, they will actually swim for 3 days straight.
Oh, wow.
Such is the power of hope. So I want to teach the country about this stuff, and join me, won't you? I'd love to do more of this.
Well, we'll connect your stuff through our app. And so our new app is coming out. Actually, by the time this airs, it's probably already out. And it's really a catch-all center for people to learn about constitutional rights, of course, registering to vote. We are a prayer movement that wants people of prayer to get into action. Prayer movement that's also an action movement. And so we'll connect them to all of that. We're gravely concerned about the family being prepared for battle. We saw during COVID, all the pornography that went through the roof, all of the addictions that went through the roof because people didn't know how to sustain a relationship with God at home. They didn't know how to not lean on a stronger person that they went and saw every week on a Sunday morning. That became their strongest place, and that has to change. The body of Christ, when we come together as a church, this is our time to celebrate, to sharpen our swords. It's a locker room, so
wherever your children are gathered together. We know where more than one is gathered, you are here and you are with us. I ask you to bless and raise and erect a hedge of protection, not just around Jenny Donnelly and Shauna and all that they are doing and Don't Mess with Kids is doing, not just in their states, in their counties, but nationwide and indeed worldwide. Be with them, be with us, be with every parent, be with every child, whether they are having a dark day, a trying time, whether they are having some sort of personal challenge, some sort of familial challenge, whether they are just lost and seeking comfort, whether they are under attack, under some sort of tyrannical regime that's coming against them, their children, their husband at work, themselves, their family, whether they're in sickness, whether they're in health, whether they're just tired, whether they're just weary. If they are your children, if they are crying out to you, if they need your light and your love, we ask that you come boldly into their midst, that you bring your light, your love, your goodness, and your words and your actions and your roadmap, and that you literally saturate every single cell of their body with your bravery, your courage, your knowledge for what they are here to do with you, in you, for this planet in such a time as this. We ask that you bless their children. We ask that you bless this fight. We ask that you gird all of us, that you protect all of us from the rear, from the front, from the sides, from attack, and that you give us the battle plan that we need to go forth, do good, and take back this nation in your name, in your power, for all that is good and true and right. Amen.
Amen. Wow, this is so powerful. We are going to encourage everybody listening today, truly 10 people right now that will never find this podcast. They don't even know it exists, or they wouldn't even know that this is the episode they need to listen to. And that's how we use our microphone, is by using our voices. And some people, your microphone is called a text message that you send this link to 10 people and say, this is worth 30 minutes, 40 minutes of your time. It will rock your world. You must listen to this. So do your due diligence. Use the influence that God's given you. He never asks us to go beyond the influence he's given us, but he certainly doesn't want us to sideline and be silent, because the enemy right now will always be the enemy. There will always be darkness, but the true enemy right now is the people who are silent and doing nothing, doing absolutely nothing. And so if you're a person that says, well, I don't want to do nothing, send this to 10 people right now. Thank you so much, Leigh, for being on here. You've greatly encouraged me personally. And I can't wait to see the fruit of this podcast, and the strategies that you gave today are absolutely incredible. And I can't wait to read your book and for other people to get this and to get on your website. So thank you so much for being here. Appreciate
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me, and good luck this Saturday in Sacramento, and good luck in October. I'll be with you, if not in body, certainly in prayer from afar, wherever I may be. And that's another way that we can take back this country, is to support the folks who are out there leading the charge with our words, with our presence, and let the evil overseers know we're not quitting until we get her done.
Come on. Thank you so much. Thank you. Wow, Shauna, I am just rocked.
That was
I am just rocked. I was thinking about how many people do not know about this podcast, not just this episode, but this entire podcast and the guests that we have had on. I am just completely blown away how God is opening doors for, a handful of people in Portland, Oregon, who just said, we've got to do something. We can't sideline this issue. We can't sit back. And there are now people all over the country. It's, 5 became 10, became 20, became 200, 2,000. And now we have just so many people that are grabbing a hold of bravery and courage and running with this thing. And so for those of you listening today, you are it. Tag, you are it. This is not about just a couple of us running. It's not just about Leigh or Shauna or me or whoever. This is about a body of people, an army. We are not an audience. We are an army standing up and saying, in love and truth, we cannot allow this to keep happening. And we are stopping right here. So praise God for people just like Leigh. Follow her on social media, go to her website, get her book, and be strengthened in Jesus' name. October 12th, put it on your calendar. This is not a day to get your dog groomed. This is not a day to say, I'm going to get married. Get married the next day, the day before, any other day but October 12th. All right. There's 364 other days to do all the things that you want to do on that day. So we're asking you for a full-on commitment to either be with us in Washington, D.C., or in your living room with a community of people, your family, to say, we are not going to do this any longer. And God, we are coming before you. And we are saying that without you, we are nothing and we need you. This is a cry from the pit of our souls and our spirits to say, America cannot keep going this direction. And if you believe this, if you believe what I'm saying and you want to join forces with us, October 12th is the day that you set aside to go before God with the rest of the globe. It's not just America. The globe is going to actually go before God and cry out for the nation of America. So we don't have time on our side to dilly-daddle around. We're doing this October 12th. All right, you guys, take care. God bless you. Share this episode with 10 people, and we'll see you next time for Don't Mess with Our Kids.